Well, we are in a very contentious political environment right now, but we probably still would be because we have decided that we like living in our partisan silos, but we would be living in a much different contentious political environment today, I think, if what Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook, Meta, Instagram, WhatsApp, had come to the realization 4 years ago that he has now come to the realization of, and that is that he should not have allowed his platforms to become subservient to the Biden administration throughout the first few years of Biden's presidency and throughout the run up to Biden's election in 2020. That's where we begin a Tuesday edition of the Bruce Hooley Show. Nice to be with you. I was out yesterday at a charity event, which I'll tell you more about a little bit later on in the show. But Mark Zuckerberg, in a letter on Monday to House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, two guys who are not politically aligned, basically admitted everything that you were told was a conspiracy theory. That Facebook, Meta, Instagram, WhatsApp did indeed make a huge mistake in not allowing the circulation of the Hunter Biden laptop story. Remember, X was owned by a very different owner then, Jack Dorsey, not Elon Musk. And when I say that we'd be in a much different contentious political environment, it would still be contentious, but Donald Trump would be wrapping up his second term in office if Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter had not done, and Zuckerberg's not with Twitter, but that's Jack Dorsey's thing then, now it's Elon Musk's. If social media had just let things play as they should have played, freedom of speech, evaluate stories on your own merit, no foot on the scale, no accusation that everything that comes out that's critical of Democrats is Russian disinformation. If that had happened, Donald Trump would be finishing his second term in the White House right now. The number of people who did not know about Hunter Biden's foreign dealings, which by the day become more apparent through the work of James Comer, Jim Jordan, House Ways and Means Committee, I don't think Joe Biden would have won the election. As it was with the Democrats lying about the Hunter Biden laptop story with Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and other social media platforms, keeping it from much of the public knowing about it, with CBS, NBC, ABC, and other networks not reporting a word about it, with 51 former CIA, FBI, Department of Justice honchos lying about the fact that it had all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. You're not supposed to hear the words all the earmarks. You're supposed to hear, it's Russian disinformation. That is exactly what people thought. And so Joe Biden did not pay an electoral price in the polls in 2020 because he's corrupt. And his son is corrupt. And his family is corrupt. And the American electorate has since said, well, I wouldn't have voted for him if I'd have known that. And the reason they didn't know it is, of course, because Zuckerberg and others, Dorsey and others, were running interference for him. And by the way, Mark Zuckerberg spent about $500 million to get out the vote, right? Yes, to get out the vote. And we've seen 2,000 Mules, and we've seen other movies, and we've seen the headlines out of Arizona and out of Michigan and out of Pennsylvania and other places where there's certainly a lot of questions to be asked. I'll be as charitable as I can. Questions to be asked about the authenticity of the vote, except then I remember that the night of the election, before they could investigate anything, we were told it was the most secure election in history. So that is where we are. Now, what did Zuckerberg say in his letter to Jim Jordan? He said his goal moving forward was to, quote, be neutral and not play a role one way or the other. That's kind of an admission that in the past you were not neutral and you did play a role one way or the other. And we know which way the door always swings, right? It always swings in favor of Democrats. This time, he said he does not want the appearance of playing a role and he will not be making political contributions. Well, gee, thanks for that, because you are the guy who gave Joe Biden the White House, and you are the guy who now has us reasonably stuck with the reasonable possibility. It's not reasonable. It's possible. There's no reason to electing Kamala Harris president because she's been a terrible vice president. She won't articulate a single policy. Prices are up. The border is not secure, but I'm going to get serious about it. Yet don't blame me for anything that's happened. That's not reasonable, but it is a possibility. So now quoting from the letter, Mark Zuckerberg to Jim Jordan in the House Judiciary Committee. He said, in 2021, senior officials from the Biden administration, including the White House, repeatedly, it's like every word of this you could pause and stop on to emphasize how important it is. What have I told you guys? What have I told you? I've told you, yeah, inflation important, immigration important, international stability important. All three, very important. Domestic energy, fighting the trans nonsense, fighting the teachers' unions, advocating for school choice, all those things that are part of the Republican Party platform under Donald Trump, all important, all super important. Most important, protecting, preserving, and expanding, because it's shrunk, our freedom of speech. We don't do that, we don't have a country. We don't do that, we don't have a country. We did not have that in the run-up to the 2020 election because you were denied information that would have changed or at least given you the possibility to consider changing your vote. You did not have that. There was no freedom of speech. Hunter Biden laptop story, Russian disinformation. Mark Zuckerberg spending on get out the vote, ballot harvesting, all that other ugly and should be illegal nonsense. Didn't know anything about it then because it was the most secure election in history. Yeah, sure it was. Zuckerberg's letter. Senior officials. Again, I said every word you could pause over and go, wow, senior officials? Not just like some underling who was like operating without senior officials knowing. No, senior officials from the Biden administration. Okay, so that's like some political appointee. No, including the White House. Next word, repeatedly. So they did it often. Repeatedly pressured our teams for months. Not once, not twice, months to censor certain COVID-19 content, including humor and satire. Don't you dare joke about the boosters. People might not take it seriously enough, which means they might not do exactly what we tell them to do. This is an amazing admission of censorship from the highest levels of the United States government. Something like that 20 years ago would have set off alarm bells, and it would be all they were talking about all day long on CNN, on every major cable channel. It would lead the nightly news. Heads would roll. People find who's behind this. Impeachment proceedings would begin. No, it's just another day in paradise at the Biden administration with the president on vacation again. Mark Zuckerberg's letter says they couldn't even allow us to publish memes or jokes, humor and satire. And he says, from the top, from the Biden administration, they expressed, quote, a lot of frustration with our teams when we didn't agree. Hey, let's have a conversation. Oh, the Democrats always want to have a conversation. Kamala Harris back in 2019 when she was running for president. And now none of that applies because, some anonymous campaign official on a Friday afternoon said, she no longer holds that position. Back then, she was more than willing to have the conversation about what? Ending the food pyramid. Oh, I think we should have that conversation. What about any other number of liberal crackpot ideas that were born into you when you were raised in Berkeley, California, from age newborn to 12? What about that? Oh, I think we should have the conversation. Except there is no conversation. The conversation is, hey, stop doing that. We're not going to do that. You don't agree with us? Oh, then we will send the power of government down to land hard on your head. That's the conversation. It's not a conversation. It's a dictation, which is what dictators do. But Trump's the dictator. Remember that. Try to keep your dictators straight. Try to keep your fascist state straight. Just what a bunch of idiots. And I could be talking about Harris and Biden, or I could be talking about, and I am talking about, people who are considering voting for them, including a lot of people in the media. It's so disappointing to me. Imagine giving your life to a profession that you turn out to realize is utterly and irrevocably corrupt. So Zuckerberg says, whenever we didn't agree, they were down our throat. But he does say, ultimately, it was our decision whether or not to take the content down, and we own our decisions. So, thanks for not too much. He says, I believe the government pressure was wrong, and I regret we were not more outspoken about it. I also think we made some choices that, with the benefit of hindsight and new information, we wouldn't make today. Like I said to our teams at the time, I feel strongly that we should not compromise our content standards due to any pressure from any administration in either direction, and we're ready to push back if something like this happens again. Sure, now you are. Now that you gave us a failed administration and 40-year highs in inflation and insecurity on the world stage and a wide open border, gee, thanks. Thanks for the do-over. Thanks for the mulligan, Mark. Really appreciate it.